The Stonecutter. I'm recording the reading in case you're having some trouble reading it on your own, but please take out your K-12 Classics for Young Readers book so you can follow along with me as I read. All right, here is The Stonecutter. When Taro was a little boy, he said, "If I ever grow up to be a stonecutter and can go up with the men in the morning and cut the great rocks from the mountainside, I shall be happy." Years went by, and Taro grew big and strong. One morning, he took his hammer and set out with the men to climb the mountain and cut the rock from the mountainside. It was a happy day for Taro. All day he swung his heavy hammer and laughed to see the great rock break and the chips fly about him. All day he worked in the hot sun, and he sang as he worked. At nighttime, he came down the mountain, tired and happy. He was glad to eat his simple supper and go to bed. And so, for many days, he worked and sang. But as time went on, he was not so happy. He grew tired of rising before the sun and climbing the mountain through the cold morning mist. As he toiled, the hot sun beat down upon his back. The hammer blistered his hands. The sharp chips cut his face. He no longer sang at his work. Taro was tired of being a stonecutter. Here's Taro. You can see the blisters and the red on his face. One day, when he had a holiday, Taro went into town. At noon, he stopped to rest before a large house that stood in the midst of beautiful rose gardens. The door of the house opened and a man came out. He was dressed in fine silks, as soft as spiders' webs and colored like the rainbow. Jewels sparkled on his hands. Taro watched him pick the roses and drop them into a great basket carried by a servant at his side. "Ah me," said Taro to himself, "this must be a very rich man." As he walked along the stony road that night, he looked at his blistered hands and thought of the rich man's jeweled fingers. When he came to his little hut at the foot of the mountain, he thought of the rich man's house in the midst of rose gardens. He looked up at the mountain, where far above him the spirit of the mountain dwelt among the clouds and mists. He thought of how he must rise the next morning before the sun and climb up there to work all day in the burning heat. "Oh, spirit of the mountain," cried Taro, "make me a rich man too, so that I may wear silks as fine as spiders' webs and live in a beautiful house and walk in rose gardens. Then I shall be happy." The spirit of the mountain heard and smiled. That very night, the little hut vanished. In its place stood a large house in the midst of rose gardens. Taro was now a very rich man. He no longer had to rise before the sun and climb the steep mountainside. He no longer had to bend all day over his work while the hot sun beat down upon his head. He could walk all day in the rose garden if he wished, but he soon became very tired of it. One day, as he stood looking out over his garden wall, a golden chariot came dashing by. It was drawn by 6 white horses, with golden harnesses glittering in the sun. A coachman dressed in white and gold sat up on the seat in front and cracked a golden whip. In the chariot sat a prince, dressed in purple and cloth of gold. Over his head there was a golden umbrella to shade him from the sun, and a servant ran beside him to fan him with a golden fan. "So this is the prince," said Taro to himself. "He is far greater than I. He rules the land for miles about. He rides in a golden chariot with a golden umbrella over his head, and a servant fans him with a golden fan. Then Taro cried to the spirit of the mountain, "O spirit, I am tired of being a rich man and walking in my rose gardens. Make me a prince who rules the land. Let me ride in a golden chariot, with a golden umbrella over my head, and a servant to fan me with a golden fan. Then I shall surely be happy." Again the spirit of the mountain heard and smiled, and again Taro had his wish. In the blink of an eye he became a prince. He lived in a fine palace. He had servants dressed in white and gold, and he rode in a golden chariot with a golden umbrella over his head. He ruled the country round about, and rich and poor obeyed him. "There is no one so great as I am," he cried. "Now I am truly happy." One hot summer day, Taro rode through his lands in his golden chariot. The flowers drooped by the wayside. The fields were dry and brown. He looked up at the hot sun that poured its rays upon the dry ground. "The sun is greater than I am," cried Taro in sorrow. "O spirit of the mountain, what pleasure is it to be a prince and rule the land and ride in a golden chariot with a golden umbrella over my head. The sun will not obey me. I wish I were the sun. Then I should indeed be happy." In an instant he was the sun. He laughed as he sent his rays down upon the backs of the poor stonecutters on the mountain. He laughed as he saw the roses wither in the rich man's gardens, and the princes try in vain to keep cool under their golden umbrellas. "Aha!" he cried, as the earth turned brown and withered beneath his rays. "Now I am really happy. I am the strongest thing in the whole wide world." But his happiness did not last. One day a heavy cloud came between him and the earth. "Be gone!" cried the sun, and shone its fiercest. But the cloud still floated before him. "Be gone!" cried Taro. "Do you not see that I am the sun, the greatest thing in the world?" But still the cloud did not move. "Alas!" cried Taro, "this cloud is greater than I. Let me be a cloud, spirit of the mountain, that I may be happy." Once more the spirit of the mountain granted Taro's wish. He became a cloud. He hid the earth from the sun and laughed at its rage. He sent cool showers upon the earth. The roses bloomed again. The fields grew green. He laughed and enjoyed his power. He rained and rained till the rivers overflowed and the land was flooded. Yet far up the mountainside the rocks stood firm. Try as he might, Taro could not move them. He poured torrents of rain upon them, but they did not stir. Because of this, Taro was not happy. "The rocks on the mountainside are mightier than I," he cried at last. "O spirit of the mountain, let me be a rock, or I shall never be really happy." The spirit of the mountain sighed a little, but it said, "Have thy wish, be a rock." It was pleasant to be a rock. The hot sun poured down its rays, and the clouds dropped the rain, but the great rock stood firm. Even the prince in his golden chariot and the rich man in his rose garden could not have moved it. Surely, now, Taro was happy. But his happiness did not last. One day, a man came to the mountain. Tap, tap, tap. The rock shivered as the hammer struck it. Tap, tap, tap. The rock split from side to side, and a great piece broke off and fell to the ground. "Oh, spirit of the mountain," cried Taro in sorrow, "man is mightier than I. Change me once more to a man, and I shall be happy and contented." Then the spirit of the mountain smiled. "Be thou a man," it said. So Taro became a man again. He became once more the poor stonecutter who lived at the foot of the mountain. Every morning he rose before the sun and climbed the mountain through banks of mist. All day he bent over his work while the hot sun beat upon his head. In the evening, very tired, he climbed down the side and was glad to eat his simple supper and go to bed. Yet Taro was happy. He had wished for many things and had tried them all, but in the end he knew that the life of a stonecutter suited him best. Once more he laughed to see the great rock break and the chips fly. And once more he sang at his work. The end.